Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. Returning listeners, it's great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, really glad you joined us. Hope you like what you hear. So, we have yet another awesome guest tonight. Her name is Katherine Kimball. She recently started, I don't know if recently is the right way to say it, in the last couple of years, started a coaching business. And she draws from a lot of personal experiences. She's very intelligent. She's very well reasoned. She's very non-judgmental, and we're going to have a great conversation with her about a wide variety of things. She was a teacher at one point. She taught in China. She's had some tough personal experiences. She's going to talk about her upbringing and how those experiences during her upbringing kind of shaped how she approached life as a young adult. Super, super smart gal, super interesting. And without further ado, let's just bring Katherine on to the channel now. So, Katherine, thank you so much for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk tonight.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. We had a great conversation, which there was part of our conversation was unbelievable. Not what you said, but that people would think the way that they thought. And I'll bring that up when the time is appropriate with our audience. It was wild to me. I couldn't believe you told what you told me. I totally believed you, but it is beyond belief when you think about it. Is a better way. I don't want to start off and say Catherine's a liar. Let's bring her on. Not at all my point. However, I'm very excited to have you on because our podcast is entirely about encouraging people to find a life of purpose and meaning. And the beautiful part, to me at least, is they need to choose what that is. So those are the only two caveats I ever put on that statement is the purpose and meaning need to matter to you, not to the people around you, not to what society tells you, but to you personally. And then you should always be challenging yourself to be the best that you can be, or the best version of that is what you should be pursuing. So that's all we do is we have conversations with folks who have had experience in life, some of it awesome, some of it not awesome, and what they've learned from those experiences and how they've built their life moving forward and what they've using what they learned after those experiences. And I know you have several examples of the things I just talked about, and you can share your perspective on those. And so I've been very excited to bring you on and introduce you to our audience. So, what we usually do is we have our guest give kind of an overview of their life. And that can start wherever you want. Some folks start in childhood because there were important things that happened in their childhood that they want to make sure that they talk about. Some folks start as an adult or in their professional career. Entirely up to you because it's your story and you get to tell it. So with that, the floor is yours, and I would love it if you could just tell us about yourself a little bit. Then we'll go back and we'll do deep dives on the big stuff, and that's where the fun starts.
Okay. Yes, I love it. Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to go too much into detail on childhood just because I don't want to drone on about any one thing. But just to give a general overview, I was raised extremely conservatively, extremely Christian, fundamentalist. I grew up in a fairly toxic household, a very emotionally and verbally abusive household. I was a little cliche in the sense of I had daddy issues, so all of my boyfriends treated me like garbage in
Mm.
one way or another. My first boyfriend in high school was abusive um, and pretty classic narcissist manipulation. When I went on to college, I left the church, lost my whole community of people because once I was no longer part of the in crowd, then I was like not someone people wanted to hang around and not someone that was a good influence. Nothing had changed about me except I'm my faith, but all of a sudden I was like, a pariah. Um, Went through a lot of depression, anxiety, a lot of issues with my parents. Was in several toxic, very emotionally unavailable relationships. And then started therapy because my depression and anxiety got so bad that I was on the verge of being suicidal. And I just was like, this is not, if I don't get help, I'm not going to live much longer. So I started therapy. It was good. I'd done therapy in high school and it was it was useless. If anything, it was worse. It took me longer to get to a point of healing. But in college, I was able to choose who my therapist was instead of getting the therapist that my parents picked out for me. So that's sort of what started my journey. But I've always been one of those people who goes all in on things. So I didn't just start therapy. I started listening to Tony Robbins and Evan Carmichael. I started listening to self-help, Les Brown, motivational speakers. I started reading self-help books. I got into meditation. I started doing meditation, all kinds of things. And I really started making progress and getting better. And once I graduated, I got a job teaching English in China. I moved totally across the world. I knew nothing about the country I was moving to. I just, I was like, what's the craziest thing I could do right now that I have an opportunity to do? And it was move halfway across the world to a country where I don't speak the language and I don't know the culture and teach English. And then I loved teaching there. I loved my entire experience there. It was amazing. I decided then that I wanted to be a teacher. I'd kind of done it as an excuse to travel, but then I was like, no, I think this is my thing. And unfortunately, while I was there, we've talked about this before, I was raped by a coworker of another foreign English teacher. So obviously that came with its own set of trauma and recovery. And then COVID happened. So my work visa got messed up and I had to come back to the States, and I decided to become a teacher here. So I got my certification to teach here, did that for four years. And completely different public school experience teaching here than it was teaching in China. Extremely stressful, 70-hour-week work weeks, no administrative support. I was working in a low SES school, a Title I school, and I was teaching on level. So 98% of my kids for most of my classes were considered at risk, which means they had either they were homeless, they were a one-parent home, they had been put in the foster care system, they had parents on drugs, they had parents in jail, a lot of trauma that they were coming from, or they were on the free and reduced lunch program. So, I mean, probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. To this day, I mean, when people make light of teachers, it is truly, if you want to do the job well, which not everybody does, but if you want to do the job well, it is the hardest job I'm convinced that I know of. But I just felt very boxed in. I based out of Texas, so I don't know how, I don't want to get too political, but there's a lot of censorship going on in Texas. And I got sick of having to find loopholes so that I was allowed to teach Black History Month and getting told, I can't teach this contemporary lit because I have to teach, some old white guy that even I find it boring. And my students definitely don't find it engaging. And just being told, our hands are tied, like the ideas that you have, the things you want to do, they would be great for the kids, but we have all this bureaucracy, we have all this structure. And then I also saw that really what I felt like my students were missing, and not just them, but their parents and a lot of my colleagues and some of my administrators, what people were missing was emotional intelligence, emotional regulation. And, I've always thought English, reading books was a great way to build empathy, because to go into this fictional world and have to imagine these characters, you have to literally put yourself in someone else's shoes. But I just felt like with all of the red tape and everything, that coaching, something more along the lines of teaching emotional intelligence, giving people emotional support, and teaching them the tools of how can I do this on my own, so that I'm not spending my whole life paying a therapist or paying a coach or repeating the same patterns and problems over and over again. And so that's kind of what my inspiration for quitting my job and starting my business as a coach was. And yeah, and I guess, I mean, I've left some struggles out, but I mean, I think that is pretty much an overview of how I got here. So
Holy moly. So yeah, you're so look, I'm 53 and you're a pretty young person to have experienced all those things that you just rattled off. That's you've had a wild ride so far, which there's good and bad in both of those or in all of those stories. But you are the kind of the sum total of experiences that you have in life. And so I have all sorts of questions and there's all sorts of topics for us to talk about. You said your household, you considered it pretty toxic. Were your parents married the whole time you were growing up? Were they like, did they get divorced or was it, what was that situation?
they're still married. Yeah. So, very, what I would describe it, if you're familiar with like, the term of a community narcissist, it's someone who really values their image to the community above
Hmm.
all else. Um, and so growing up, I mean, it could be terrible at home, right? There could be yelling, screaming, fighting, whatever. But as soon as other people were around, all of a sudden we're happy, everything's fine, everything's good. We're a
Hmm.
wonderful, good Christian family with Christian values. And we're just happy and everything's amazing because, we're Christian and we're conservative and we're good people.
Got it.
And
Yeah.
behind closed doors, not the same case, not an emotionally safe place. Very turbulent. A lot of pressure was put on me as a child that was probably not probably was definitely not appropriate to put on a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, where you're telling them that they're in charge of making you happy, or they're in charge of curing your depression, or they're in charge of taking care of their older brother who has a disability. And also my emotions weren't welcome, right? I mean, if I, like, after my grandfather died when I was 8 or 9, right? Me crying about it or acting out or getting upset was a burden. It wasn't like it was not presented as a normal reaction to experiencing grief for the first time as a child. It was presented as, you are being a burden and making things worse for everybody else around you. Please stop. And a lot of that, when you're younger, it gets internalized because at that age, your brain is not actually capable of understanding that everything that happens, good or bad, it's not because of you. And I forget the psychological term for it, but I think it's the egocentric phase, where literally and developmentally you believe that everything that happens is because of you, whether it's good or bad. And so, yeah, so I does that illustrate more? Like, did I answer your question, I guess?
You totally answered it. Yeah. And the reason I asked the question, so I always try to be very clear about what we're doing here, because it's not like, for me, it's not picking at scabs. What I want to do is illustrate the examples for our audience, because who knows who else is out there who has similar experiences or might know someone that's going through a similar experience right now. So if they hear it described by someone who's gone through it and has been able to process it and articulate it in a meaningful way, I think there's value in that. So just to be very clear about why we do what we do, that's the whole point, from our perspective. And it's, you said something, I can't remember if we were recording or not, but I think we were. There there's a lot of people with a very low emotional intelligence, and you see that so often. And I always tell people more than one thing can be true at the same time. So a person could be very high functioning in their profession or very high functioning at different aspects of life. And still, when those things happen, when something triggers them, they don't have coping mechanisms in place and they kind of just go off the rails. And I've seen that happen quite a bit. It's very interesting to me. I learned coping mechanisms and emotional intelligence through sports because I was good at sports. And that meant I was on teams that played at very competitive levels pretty early in my life. So I was playing sports in front of hundreds of people when I was 9 and 10 years old. And, there's pressure involved with that. And if you don't succeed, then everybody knows you. Like, there's no hiding from it. It's right there. And you've got to learn how to compartmentalize that, learn the lesson, because if you just if you just that's the part that most people skip, is they want to ignore it and act like it didn't happen instead of confronting it and learning the lesson so that you can avoid that situation or create what I call a different outcome. I always try to stay away from the words success or failure because I don't think they're appropriate. What you get is an outcome. You take an action or a series of actions and you get an outcome. And if you like the outcome that you got from the action or series of actions, you should repeat those actions or series of actions. If you don't like the outcome, you should take different actions, because it reframes. I think a lot of people struggle with guilt and they feel guilty, like you had just talked about. If I'm a 5 or 6 year old and someone says, I drink because you cry, right? Then
Yeah.
that's problematic if you're a 5 or 6 year old. And it was, anyhow, that's why I asked the questions. That's the whole point of me asking the question. So, what point in your life did you recognize, even as a kid, that like these things weren't right, or when did you recognize in your life that, hey, this is some shit I went through that I probably need to figure out how to mentally process it? At what point in your life did you do that?
Yeah. So I don't think as a kid I fully understood what was happening. I just knew I wanted to get out. I knew I wanted to get away. I just like that was my light at the end of the tunnel. Is like when I turn 18, I can go off to college and I can escape all of the craziness that is my family. And if I can
Hmm.
just play by the rules and if I can just make people happy and if I can just make it there. Um and just hold it all in until I get out and then I thought, everything's going to be fine. Um I it took me a long time to recognize what was happening was projection onto me as a child, right? I just thought of it as like my parents hate me or I'm there's a lot of internalization of like I'm not like the person to be here. I don't fit in here. I'm the black sheep. um I just thought it was all my fault, and I mean I would get in arguments because I felt like I was living sometimes with crazy people because I would get in these huge arguments with my dad and then like he'd walk off, he'd storm off, time would pass, come back, well nothing ever happened. If I tried to bring it up, well you said this or yeah, I never said that. I don't know what you're talking about. I never yelled at you. Like you're just making this up. I and it just it was infuriating. And to some extent I'd have the same thing with my mom, where she would say, oh well your dad has never yelled at you, and if he has you deserved it. And then in the next beat, right, and the next beat she'd just be like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and talk to your dad. I just forget that, you're not used to all of his yelling and angriness. And, I've experienced it for 20 years longer than you have. So I'm just more used to it. And And I'm just like, didn't you just say that he's never yelled at me in my life? And if he ever has, it's because I completely deserved it. But then like less than 5 minutes later, right? So there's a lot of gaslighting. There's a lot of denial, right? But I don't think I started to recognize that until probably when when I started therapy, and two, when I read the book Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
Hmm.
Probably those two things were what kind of helped me see, like, okay, I'm not the crazy one. Like, this is really happening. And that's a hard realization to have, because and I've talked about this with my husband before, because he's had some of similar issues, and I've seen this with clients before when they have issues with their parents. Is it is easier to say that you're the problem, because at least you can control that. But if you admit that the other person you're in this toxic or abusive relationship with is the problem, you now have no control. And especially as a kid, that's extremely terrifying. To the person who's in charge of taking care of you is not an emotionally stable or trustworthy person or safe person to be around, right? That is way scarier and harder to accept than, oh, there's just something wrong with me.
Mm.
And I think a lot of that is why it is so hard. Like, people can point out the flaws in their partners and their friends, but when it comes to admitting the flaws of their caregivers or their parents, it is so hard for them to talk about the flaws or admit that there's flaws in that sort of nuclear family they grew up with.
Huh. That's super interesting. I'm thinking about that from from my perspective, because we used to just kind of call it out to each other, and I had some crazy like my dad served in Vietnam for a year, and he was drafted, and he he had some really tough experiences over there for sure, but he just kind of compartmentalized those, and for whatever reason I was the one he chose to talk to about a lot of them. Well, I mean, I was 8 or 9 years old, so he's telling me war stories. I mean war stories, things that he'd done and things that he'd seen, and et cetera, et cetera. And like, I can remember thinking, well, shit, I better make my bed. My dad's killed a bunch of people, so no, I guess the stakes just got a lot higher on cleaning my room. But my point there is, people are made of different constitutions. So, like, I have always had a tremendous amount of self confidence, and that can be problematic in its own right, because you can wind up in situations that you should have been smart enough to avoid, but you weren't, because you had confidence in your ability to handle it, and that it'll spin out of control on you. And other people walked a long ways away from it and said, hey, let this idiot handle it. He's willing to. And there you are, the idiot that winds up handling it, right? So it's not all rainbows and unicorns when I talk about the self confidence part. But I think in that instance, it served me well, because, like, I have three sisters, and they like expect a lot more out of my dad than he's capable of. And that's kind of something I always try to coach people is, you can't ask more out of people than they've got to give you. And now this is easy. We're two adults sitting here having this conversation. You went through all this when you were 5 and 6 years old. So, like, it's the old cliche. You can't pick your parents. You can't pick your family. You just kind of get stuck there, right? But I encourage people, as you get older, you know, think about what you're asking of the person you're asking it of, and are they capable of it? Do they have it in them? Now, you can make excuses for people, and like, I use the anger one because that's always been my challenge. I'm super Irish. I know it's hard to tell by looking at me, but I'm super super Irish, and so I don't drink. I've never been drunk in my life. Just my choice. I've got nothing against it. It just never made sense to me. So I fight twice as much to make up for it, because that's what us Irish people do. We drink and we fight. Now, I literally can go from this conversation to let's go outside right now with somebody in a couple of seconds. Like, I'm wired that way, However, that does not uh, absolve me of the responsibility to develop coping mechanisms so that I handle that in an appropriate way. And it's still there. And so when people talk about I'm just that way, no bullshit. You choose to be that way. And there's a difference between, having high level conversations with a 5 or 6 year old and, this is your fault because I don't want to deal with my own shit. Like, that's a, that's a tough gig. You said your first foray into therapy, you didn't find real useful. What did you not find? Like, what was it about it that you didn't find useful?
No, yeah. Well, I think mostly because my parents chose the counselor for me. And since I was still a minor when I'd asked for it, um, she was very, I mean, she meant well, but it was kind of like, I don't know, I'm just guessing here, but if I had to guess, my parents told her their version of like, oh, this is her issue and stuff, right? And we just don't understand, and we don't understand what's going on, and we have no idea why she acts like this, um, and in a way, she was very dismissive. So I'll give you an example. So, my first boyfriend was very abusive, and he molested me a couple of times while we were in our relationship. He was 4 years older than me. I was 14 when we started dating, and he was 17, and then we broke up when I was 15 and he was 18. No,
Ooh,
no, actually, I think he was already 18 when we started dating, actually.
those
When
are
we met,
important years. Yeah, those are important years too. There's a big difference between an 18-year-old guy and a
I was
14-year-old girl. We're
14.
talking about a 30-year-old and a
He's never been in
26-year-old.
a relationship before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
And so obviously, like, I grew up in abstinence education culture, right? And Texas still does abstinence education, which I'm hugely against. But I had no clue. I was never educated on what consent looked like or anything like that, right? And or what a healthy relationship looked like and what was emotional abuse and what wasn't. So, when he said things like, oh, if you break up with me, I'd kill myself. I didn't register that as a 14-year-old as emotional manipulation
Mm.
because I was used to people putting their problems, like everything was my fault, right? So now all of his problems are my fault. That's just a natural continuation of what I was taught was normal. And when he molested me, I didn't understand that. Well, I told him I didn't want him to do that, and then he did it anyway. And then I tried to stop him, but then he overpowered me. I didn't, in my mind, as a 14-year-old kid that didn't know any better, I was not thinking, oh, this is sexual assault. I need to go report him to the police. I was thinking, I cannot tell my parents about this because I will be so dead.
Mm.
Right? Like, I cannot let anybody know that this thing happened because this is a bad thing that I wasn't supposed to let happen, and I let it happen. Right? And but I didn't even realize until I was 17, when I was reading an article for a research paper in my English class, that what had happened to me was sexual assault. Because the article I was reading explained, if someone does something to you that, anything sexual, it doesn't have to be rape. It can be if they touch you inappropriately and you told them you didn't want to, or they didn't have permission to do that, and then they do that, that is sexual assault. And when I was reading that 3 years after the fact was when I, for the first time, was like, oh my God, I was sexually assaulted.
Mm.
And not pretty soon after that, I started having chronic nightmares. And I had chronic nightmares for about 3 years, where I mean, almost every single night I was having super violent, very graphic nightmares of like either me getting tortured and killed, my family getting tortured and killed, my friends getting tortured and killed. And I mean, like, vivid detail that didn't even make sense. Like, I never watched like really violent stuff. I mean, I guess I watched maybe like Saving Private Ryan, when I was in high school, but like really just super graphic, awful dreams, like of like people getting their skin peeled off in front of me and someone just like
Yikes.
slaughtering people with my entire class with machine guns, like just coming in and just like shooting them till like they were falling apart. And I mean, I still remember them because they were I like traumatizing to me. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night feeling like I had bugs crawling on me. Because I have a fear of spiders. So like I'd wake up feeling like I had spiders crawling all over me, and I would just be like super freaked out and having like hyperventilating. And I remember telling this therapist what I was seeing, and I told her, because a friend of mine actually, because in my head it's just like, oh, whatever, I'm having nightmares, it's fine. but but a friend of mine was like, that's not normal, right? Like, that's not like, if you're literally having nightmares every single night, that's something you should probably tell your therapist about. And I was like, okay. And so I told her about it, and she was like, oh, well, that's not a big deal. People who say that dreams mean this stuff, like, she's like, things in dreams, there can sometimes be a pattern. There can sometimes, be some pattern to the dream, but they're not in the whole, like, dreams have some sort of meaning. It's very overblown. And she's like, for example, my husband has sleep apnea, and one time his little mouth guard thing, it had fallen and out of place, right? So it's kind of blocking his airway. Well, he had this dream that someone was strangling him, but it was just like, the mouth guard slightly out of place. And so dreams can just be exaggerations of what we've gone through. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I guess this is just like my brain, my subconscious being dramatic. Like, I don't actually have anything that I should be upset about. And I think that was a lot of my beginnings of like me feeling like there is something wrong with me, and these people telling me like, well, there's literally no reason for you to have something wrong with you, because you have this great life, you have this great family, you have these great parents, like you're well off, like you have everything given to you, there's nothing you could possibly want for, like, you're just kind of crazy for acting out and having these emotional issues and having all these nightmares, and I mean, to this day, I still have issues with over explaining myself, because I just had people deny for so long that I had any reason to be upset about stuff.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Just real quick, did your parents know that when you were 14 you were dating an 18-year-old?
They did. They
And
didn't know
they were cool with
anything
it?
else. They were not cool with it. They did not like that I was dating him. Um, but I was pretty stubborn and insisted, that I wanted to date him. And so, yeah, but they never knew about any of that. They didn't know about what went
Sure.
on. They didn't know about the nature of our relationship or anything. They didn't like him. But at that point, I was like, he gives me more attention than I've gotten.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and you had said that your relationships when you were a younger lady, uh I don't know if you said you were attracted to those types of men or you just wound up in those types of relationships, but it sounds like they mirrored what you were used to seeing from your house. Is that a fair statement?
yeah, no, it's a fair statement. My first serious relationship in college, he was very emotionally unavailable. My second relationship in college, everything was about him. I mean, we'd talk about him for forever. And I'd do everything for him and get breadcrumbs back,
Hmm.
right? But he was very vulnerable with me, He's very emotionally open with me. So in my mind, I wasn't used to that. I was used to very emotionally unavailable people. So I did sort of, and this is really common, and I've seen it with my clients and the women that I've coached and friends and things like that. Is a lot of people, what they do is they kind of stair step up. So each relationship you have, it's like it's better than maybe your parents treated you, but it's still screwed up. It's like, okay, well, you don't just ignore me unless you need something from me. You give me more attention, but you molest me.
Mm.
Right? And you emotionally manipulate me. And so then, break up with him. And then the next guy is like, well, you don't abuse me. You don't physically abuse me. Like, how wonderful. And you don't emotionally manipulate me and verbally abuse me and like send me on guilt trips all the time. So like, you're the best thing since sliced bread, And it's like, but you're still very emotionally unavailable. You're still, um, we can't have emotional conversations. I can't be open with you about how I'm feeling about stuff. You don't provide me emotional support. You just tell me to, suck it up and, pull myself up by my bootstraps and just get my shit together, stop
Mm.
having all these feelings. Right. Um, and so then it's like, break up with him, start dating another guy, and it's like, oh, well, he actually shares his emotions with me. Like, this is amazing. There's like emotional intimacy. But then it was like extremely one-sided emotional intimacy where I was there for all of his emotional needs, but then he wasn't necessarily there for mine. And I do think that a lot of it is it sucks to say and people don't like hearing it, but it's that you don't think you deserve better than those people. Some
Mm.
part of your unconscious, I didn't think I deserved better than that. I thought expecting more from someone was outrageous, was selfish, was unreasonable. Um, because for a long time I did have sort of that story that I would tell myself of like, I don't understand. I do all these things for these people. Like, why can't I meet a nice guy? And these people just end up treating me like shit. And, what is it with guys, And after like a lot of self reflection, a lot of meditation, a lot of therapy, I realized I was like, there were at different points in my life where I had really great guys that were interested in me that I also found attractive and thought were cute. But some part of me never thought that I never could believe that they were actually interested in me.
Mm.
I can think of one guy in high school and one guy in college that were great guys. I was great. I was best friends with them. It was very obvious that they were into me. I was into them, but I couldn't even fathom that they would actually genuinely like me because I didn't think that that's what I deserved. I didn't. And and so I think a lot of times people make that they're like, oh well, I just, I've tried but every guy I meet just well, it's like you've probably actually met guys that were not like that, but you didn't feel attracted to them because they didn't feel attainable to you. Or they didn't feel familiar enough because you grew up in chaos, you're used to chaos. When you find peace, a lot of times peace you mistake it for boring because you
Yeah.
don't know
Right.
any.
Yeah. Boring's pretty cool, right? Boring's pretty cool. In certain aspects, right? I mean, so it's interesting. I've been married to my wife for 32 years, and we met. I was 21 and she was 19 when we got married, and we only dated for a year. We got engaged about 6 months after we started dating, too. Like it was one of those things where like we instantly knew, and we had no intent. Like that when we met, I was in between. I was home for summer. I was going back to school to play baseball, and we met. And I told her, I just got out of a long distance relationship because the girl I'd been dating had dumped me. And I said, I'm not really looking to get into another long distance relationship. I'm leaving in 3 months. And she was kind of like, I don't know who you think you are, but like, I just got out of high school because I'm 2 years older than her. And she's like, I just got out of high school. I'm not, looking to settle down or anything. So we can have some fun this summer and we'll see what happens. And then a month in, we're like, well, son of a bitch, this is it. Like, it was like, both of us knew like immediately. But Well, I always say, and this is just kind of tagging on to what you just talked about, I didn't have to settle, so I didn't. And I didn't get lucky in marrying my wife. I married my wife because she's a fucking awesome lady. She is, I mean, yeah, she's physically very attractive, but she's 1,000 times better as a person, which is why we've been together for 32 years. Don't get me wrong. I love that she's beautiful. That is important to me. I'm not going to lie and say, oh, I wish she was an old hag. I like that she's pretty. I like that she's feminine. I like that she's really good looking, but she's 1,000 times better just as a human being than she is physically attractive. And that's what I love about her. And she knows that I would do anything for her and that I'm committed to her and that I care about her and my family and I'm very loyal and blah, 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 blah. She didn't have to settle either. So she didn't. And I just hear young people today, listen to me, young people, you kids get off my lawn. Um, I hear young people today talking about such superficial bullshit. And it drives me insane because I can guarantee you, I will make this guarantee to anyone listening. You're not going to roll over when you're 70 years old and look at your spouse and go, oh, thank God you're still good looking. That's not going to happen. What you will do is roll over and go, thank God you were there for me when whatever happened happened through the cancer diagnosis, through the foreclosure, through the job loss, through the whatever trials and tribulations are going to happen in your life. You need someone that you can count on. And what Catherine has been talking about to this point is not having anyone like that in her life when she was a kid and as a young lady. And I think it's terribly important what she's talking about now. She's learned these lessons and she's sharing these lessons with you. I just want to draw that out because I think it's so terribly important. You need to think about what's actually important in a relationship to you and find that. And I haven't heard once. So, okay, I think I heard you say, there were guys that were cute, but it was superficial. That wasn't what you were talking about. You were talking about guys that you thought were decent guys that would have treated you well, that would have been emotionally available to you, that would have cared about you in an appropriate way. And hey, it doesn't hurt that they're easy on the eyes either, right? That's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with thinking people are attractive. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be attracted to the person you're with. I think that's a good thing, but it shouldn't be the primary thing that you're with. And that goes for men too, by the way. So these guys that chase really good looking women, what are you doing? Like, you don't even know who they are or how they are. Maybe they're awesome. Maybe they're total jerks. You don't know. But just to chase them simply because you find them visibly attractive, I've never understood that. Like, I've literally never understood that. But I love how you kind of laid all that out and talked about that. Religion. So you, uh, I think you said, I'm trying to remember exactly what you said, and I'm not trying to pin you to it. I just don't want to misstate what you said. You walked away from religion when you got out on your own and into college. What was your thought process behind that? What was it about religion that made you want to get away from it?
Yeah. So that is a very complicated answer that we could probably have a whole podcast just about that. But and what I'll say is over the years it has changed and things like that, as far as my understanding and interpretation of it. But at the end of the day, if you break it down, why I walked away from the religion I was raised in is because I was told, and I think any religion to some extent has this message, this organized religion. Um, if you believe in this God and follow these rules, you're going to have a better life because of it. Maybe not in this life, but in the afterlife. But like you're going to bear fruit, right? Good fruit. If you're a Christian, you're going to have more love and understanding. You're going to be a more moral or ethical person. This is going to help you do that. And what I saw from a very early age was, forgive my swearing, but religion makes has no fucking impact on how ethical or moral you are as a person. There are horrible fucking people in every single organized religion. And they're really great people, don't get me wrong. They're amazing, wonderful people, but your religion has zero impact on how ethical you are as a person. It has zero impact on how much love you put out into the world versus how much darkness you put out. It has zero impact on if you're evil or not, zero impact on if you're good or not. And to me, that's the whole promise of religion, right? Is we're going to create more good people. We're going to create more ethical, loving people because that's what our God is about. I don't see that. And I see organized religion, especially Christianity, as 100% fear-based. It's so much about, oh, I don't want to go to hell. And I'm afraid of going to hell, and I'm afraid of having my friends and family go to hell. So I'm going to believe in this God because I want to be saved and I want to go to heaven. I truly believe if you are acting from a place of fear, no matter how high your intentions are, maybe I'm saying, well, I'm a Christian and I believe in Jesus preached love and peace, and I don't want to go to hell, and I'm scared of going to hell, and I'm scared of what happens if there's not love and peace, and you're coming from that place of fear. What is going to happen and what is going to come of your actions is never going to be as good as if you're coming from a place of love, if you're coming from a place of abundance, if you're coming from a place of peace yourself. And so I'm sharing this with you because it brought me peace or it brought me love, right? And you don't have to, if it's not for you, that's fine. I'm still going to love you. You're still going to be an important person to me. I'm not judging you for that. That to me is how everyone should be. And I don't see that in Christianity, because Christianity says you have to believe this. You have to believe Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. He is the way and the light and truth. And if anyone believes anything else, it's wrong. And when you go to that, I'm wrong and you're right, you're always going to get division. You're going to get violence. You're going to get extremism. You're going to get what you see happening now with Christian nationalism taking over with white supremacy. And I mean, that's my belief. And I know there's a lot of people who would think that was wrong. Now, what I will say is I've seen Christians that I feel like their faith is based in love and is based in abundance, but they are always the progressive Christians who it's not about being right or wrong, because they have a level of humility in them where they understand of like, I have faith that I believe in the right religion, but I don't know for certain. I'm not 100% sure. And I think when you do say I'm 100% sure that I'm right and everyone else who believes differently than me is wrong, you're headed down a very different levels of, depending on who you are, differing levels of a dangerous path, whether it's just isolating people or narrowing your experience of life. I've had friends that were very open-minded, very progressive, and then because of tragic events decided to get super, super religious, and they lost friends over it. They really narrowed down who they were able to connect with and who they were able to have connections with, and lost a lot of beautiful things because they just shut down and just went, this is it. So to me, that is ultimately it. And I think people, you could argue the theology all day. You can argue about, oh, well, the facts of it, and this religion's been around for longer, and there's better records, and here's why this is proof that it's true. Like, what we've seen is people can have all the facts, and everybody's going to look at the same facts and have 10 different interpretations of it. The facts don't matter. I want to see the actions, and I want to see the results. And what I've learned is organized religion does not get you good results most of the time. You get a very judgmental, very, not fun, not tolerant, people that want to tell you how to live your life and want to control you or manipulate you into doing what they think is right. And some of them are nicer about it, right? But ultimately, they're still always going to come to you with, here's why you're wrong. And I think if you can't, you can do that in the nicest way possible. But if you are setting out to always think that someone else is wrong, you've automatically limited the connection you can have with that person. I love the quote, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's a quote by Rumi. And he says, out beyond the place of right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there. And I think that's very powerful, because I think, I've never met two people that believe the same in everything. Even when I was in the Christian church, I never met a Christian that believed the same theology as another one. I mean, even if they were co-pastors, like a pastor and assistant pastor, they still had differing beliefs. Look in the same family, the same denomination. They could be Reformed Presbyterian. They could agree on the 5 points of Calvinism, but there's something that they differ on. So yeah.
Yep. So a couple of love that. Absolutely love it. I appreciate you speaking from the heart like you just did. Those are the best when conversations are genuine. They're the best conversations. And so that's what the salty is and salty ginger talk. You get to say whatever you want on our podcast. So you don't have to warn people. You don't have to apologize for it. Let it fly. Sometimes that particular word in that particular instance is the only word that can convey the right emotion or the right meaning. I also shamelessly plug myself because I cuss like a sailor left to my own devices, but there's been lots of studies that show that people that cuss are more trustworthy, more loyal, and more intelligent than people that don't. So I wave those studies around simply to defend myself because I cuss like a sailor. But I find religion super interesting, and just my own religion. I don't believe in God. That's just me personally. I've never been involved in organized religion. However, I see some people that get a ton of strength and belief and live really good lives because of their faith in God or Jesus or Muhammad or the Torah or whatever your thing is. And I'm fully supportive of that. I love that they get strength and are able to live a good life because of the beliefs that they've developed from that. So I'm very accepting and very interested in hearing people's perspectives on religion. Now, with that said, I would also point out there's two forces in this world that have been the cause of more damage and harm and murder and greed than anything else. One of them is government, and the second one is organized religion. It just is. Like when you think about the number of people that have been killed under communist regimes or socialist regimes or fascist regimes, it's in the hundreds of millions of people. And there's been about 110 billion people that have ever walked the face of the earth at one point. Pretty big percentage of them been killed by a despotic government. Almost, or if not more, bigger percentage of them have been killed in the name of religion. How many holy wars, religious wars have been fought? The Spanish Inquisition. So the challenge I always have with it is what you just kind of did such a good job of eloquently laying out is that it's always used. It eventually always is used for bad purposes because it's power. And whenever someone is able to command that much power, it affects how they think. And look, I've been around, right, wrong, or indifferent. I've been around multiple billionaires. And I don't mean like, oh, I was in the same place as Jeff Bezos one time. Like, I know and have worked with and like several billionaires. That amount of the power that comes with that fucks with your head. It makes you think different. And you kind of have to actually, when you stop and think about it, when I see what happens to them simply because they're sitting on top of this big mountain of money, they don't get treated the same as other people. Whether people think they want to treat them the same or not, they just don't. And it's no different if you're the person that's in charge of absolution at the Catholic Church, or if you're the person that's in charge of whether you have to wear a mask or get a shot or not when COVID is going on. Anytime you have that much power concentrated with a small group of people, it's a really bad situation. I mean, bad. And those are the things that really kind of make me, I find it very difficult to wrap my mind around how a God, if there is a God, how a God would allow those types of things to happen. But I'm very respectful of people that see it differently, and I'm not telling them they're wrong. I'm telling them I see it differently, and I'm absolutely willing to have a very respectful conversation around those topics. But I really appreciate you sharing it because you were kind of brought up in it, and you have a very unique perspective on it because of that.
Yeah, and I think so. So in college and stuff, I just straight up considered myself an atheist.
Hmm,
And I think for me, it was a palate cleanser of I
hmm,
just for so much was shoved down my throat. And I mean, not I say shoved down. I mean, there were points. I mean, I was really bought into it, right? I mean, I had a Bible that was highlighted. It had tabs, and as a kid, I went to the adult Bible study to learn the more advanced theology. I was a nerd my whole life, um, and like, but I was like, and a lot of people, they always want to say like, oh, well, you went through stuff or you suffered and you had this traumatic experience happen to you and it just drove you away from religion because you blamed God. I'm like, no, actually, when stuff would happen to me, that was when I wanted to go deeper into the Word of God, and I wanted to study the Bible more, and I wanted to pray more, and then it didn't help, and then I saw it not helping all these people in my life, and and it was just like, okay, well, there's got to be more, because this is just like at that, to the levels I was getting into it, this is just circular logic. There's so many things that there aren't answers for in the Bible, and then I got into like, well, the original Hebrew, and I saw all the different translations, and oh, and it just like, the more I learned about it, I was like, really? Like, you really think that like a bunch of men who were writing 40 years after Jesus lived, and then like they didn't even decide what was canon until even hundreds of years after that, and it was mostly white men. It wasn't even Jewish people who decided what was canon for the Christian Bible, and they're dealing with like the 5 times translated texts, like, it's just, so I just was done with it. I was just like, I don't want, no, I'm just, this is just all bullshit, but to your point is, I do now, I mean, I do have what I consider, when I started getting into meditation and things like that, I do have what I consider a very spiritual relationship, and what I've come to understand is I do believe in a higher power. I do believe that there's a divinity, but I don't think it is what how we typically perceive a god,
hmm,
right? I think of it more as, there's the laws of the universe, there's laws of physics, right? There's laws of gravity, and those things follow certain patterns. And then I believe the divine force is the same way, right? If you do good things and you try to put love into the world, I think your life is going to tend to go one way, and if you bring darkness and bad things into the world, it's going to go another, and everyone's going to bring a little bit of both, and it goes back to the balance that you were talking about, but trying to bring more good than bad, and because there's certain laws, right? When you have, if I am going to be violent to you or awful to you, even if you end up not being able to, I don't know, seek justice from me or take revenge on me, you're going to, either project it onto someone else, or you're going to turn around and tear someone else down because you were treated the way that I treated you, and you're hurt, and so now you're going to put that out into the world. You're going to it's going to web out, right? But or you can choose to stop, that and turn it into light and turn it into good, and then that's what's going to web out from you. And so it's not like some God deciding what happens. You know what I mean? I think it's just that is the natural way. If you're giving love out, you're going to be more resilient in the face of adversity, and you're going to find purpose and meaning because you know that when you help people and when you serve people, that makes you feel good. And it brings good things into your life, and you want good things and you want to feel good, you know, and it's going to compound on itself. And so I think we as humans, we anthropomorphize everything, right? I mean, think of a little kid with their Beanie Baby. It's like it doesn't have a personality, but in that kid's head it does. It has a name, and it has it likes and doesn't like. And we do that with our dogs too. I mean, I'm like, this dog has this kind of personality, and we have all these little stories when like probably the dog only maybe understands like 20% of what we think it does, you know, but we have this like whole, we anthropomorphize it. And I think that's what we do with divinity. I think we see this force that is beyond our understanding, so we tell a story to help ourselves understand it. And I think that's all organized religion is. And stories can be very helpful. Stories can have great wisdom and teach you great things. But when you start getting really literal about your stories and really legalistic about your stories and arguing that your story is the right one and their story is not, you know, then it gets complicated, and I think you lose the point.
Yeah, that's always the problem. That's always the problem I have with it is, let's assume for a second that you're right. There is a God. I don't think they want you judging people. I don't think that's right. That don't seem right to me. I don't think that's your job. I think it's your job to do the best you can. And if it's funny, because I did, I guess a couple things. I'm jumping around a little bit here, but I'm not. I don't believe in God. I've never believed in God. But my wife, who was raised Catholic, said I'm by far the most spiritual person that she's ever met, and I think that's interesting. And what she means by that is I have a set of beliefs, and I live by those beliefs regardless of kind of the cost of those beliefs to me. Like, I try to treat people well. Look, don't get me wrong. If you cross me, it's not going to be a good day for you. Like, I'm not a pushover in any way, shape, or form. I treat people the way they deserve to be treated. So I'm also fortunate that I'm one of the people in the world that if someone is being a jerk to someone else, if there's like a physical confrontation, I can handle that as well. So like I can stop people from, like, you know, if you think you're tough, come pick on me. We'll see how tough you are at that point. But don't pick on, I don't have any respect for someone that picks on people smaller than them or weaker than them. Like, there's nothing worse in the world to me. But I live by those values, and they're important to me. Like, you know, like I would never cheat on my wife, not because of her. Like, I'm glad like she gets the benefit of that, but it's because of me. I would know that I did that. I wouldn't do that. So I would have to live with myself if I did that, and I wouldn't do it. So the fact that she is an awesome lady and super supportive and all the other things that I say about her, which are all true, by the way, those are just icing on the cake. I would be that way no matter what, because that's who I am. That's important to me. But to your point, like, that's always been one of my problems with like confession. So wait, like I can just go tell someone about this and say a couple of prayers and then I'm all good. Like, I guess I have a problem with, like, I've been with my wife for 33 years as a couple, married for 32. I've never, ever like looked sideways at another woman. I've never laid a finger on my wife. Never would. I've never laid a finger on my kids. Never would. I've never been drunk in my life. I've never taken an illegal drug in my life. I don't have any tattoos. I've never stolen anything in my life. Like, isn't that better than me just saying, hey, this guy is my personal savior, and now I'm going to go smoke some weed and sleep with my side chick and not pay my child support and all the other stuff that, like, I have a real hard time reconciling that that's okay in my head. And I say that, I don't mean that to be judgmental to the people that are doing those things, because what I have learned over the years is the people that are doing those things those are behaviors. They're acting out something that's deeper, that's causing that. Those are just symptoms of something bigger that's the problem. And if you can get to the problem, you can get rid of those behaviors like that. You can solve them because we've seen people do it before. Um, but I just have a real hard time with that. That's hard for me to reconcile in my head. So for what it's worth, that's my big challenge.
Yeah, and I think for me too, I feel the same way of, you know, to me, there's nothing moral about believing in a certain God. I think people should be judged on their actions and what's in their heart, right? And I think even there are some Christians who would argue that if you actually understand the Bible, that is true, right? That it's not just about believing in a God, and giving lip service to a God, but should be about putting good acts into the world and loving people. Um, and so I've always kind of, what's that quote? You know, if there are gods and they're good gods, then all they're going to care about is if I lived a good life or not, right?
Right.
And if they're the type of God that I lived a good life, but just because I didn't believe in them, they're like, oh, you deserve hell. And I'm like, then take me there, take me to hell, because that's like, I don't want to be serving a God that is like so egocentric that it's like everything is about worshiping him and has nothing to do with the kind of person you try to be, you know, or the values that you commit to living out.
Yeah, totally agree with you. So shifting gears a little bit, you talked about teaching in China, and I want to talk both about the differences between what you saw in China and what you saw in the United States, and then if you're willing to, a little bit about your experience there where you were raped by your coworker, because I think there's a value in you being able to tell that story in case other people in our audience had similar experiences and can hear how you handled it when it happened to you.
Yeah. So in China, so I was their English immersion teacher. So they have, so those, the way that it's set up is you have your English class, which is if anyone here in the States has taken a foreign language. In Texas, it's usually Spanish. But you know, the teacher is teaching in English, and then they give you like the words in Spanish, and you have your vocabulary set, and then you
Yeah.
learn like, okay, right, and each unit is sort of like, here's a new group of words to learn in this other language.
Senora
And then
Larson. Senora Larson in my case.
yeah, I had Senora Benedicta. So, but yeah, and so they have that class in China, but then they have their immersion class. And what that class is you're just practicing speaking English. So it was usually staggered with their other English class. So for example, they learn colors in their regular English class, and then they come to their immersion English class where we start talking about colors and we start practicing like, what's your favorite color, and we play games where they practice talking and stuff like that. So that was what I did. I had, let's see, I taught, I think, 10 different classes of 4th and 5th grade. I had about, I think my smallest class was 51 students, and my largest class was 68 students.
Holy moly.
Yeah. So I had over 600 students that would see me once a week for their immersion class. And then I taught an advanced 7th grade class. I taught an advanced English 7th grade class, and we did poetry and more like advanced things. But yeah, I loved it. I love living in China. The cost of living was super low. I lived in a fairly nice apartment in a downtown area, big city. I lived in Shenzhen. And just the experience of living there and teaching there was amazing. The kids were amazing. They were super respectful. They were so sweet. They were so excited and enthusiastic to learn. They were so excited to get to interact with someone that looked different and was from a different place than they'd ever visited before or seen. And like for a lot of my kids, because a lot of their foreign English teachers that they had been men, I was the first female foreign English teacher they had. So for most of my students, I was the first female white person that they'd ever seen. So there was a lot of novelty there. My experience of the Chinese people that I interacted with was that they were very helpful, very kind, very community based. And so like a lot of the grandparents would take care of the children. And so at least in my area where I was from, the norm was that when you have kids, you usually have them when you're in the middle of developing your career. And so you're busy developing your career, and your grandparents, the grandparents are who raise and take care of the children. So that you and your husband or spouse can focus on your careers and focus on each other. And then when your kids have kids, that's when you retire and go take care of their kids and you raise their kids. And it different, but very interesting and very family oriented, and lots of parents that lived with their parents, so like 3-generation households. And it would be cute, you know, like when I'd leave school, you'd see all the grandparents waiting out there to pick up their kids and stuff. And just really, really fun experiences. I started meditation before that, but I really got into meditation when I was there. It was really cool to get to go to like Buddhist temples and Taoist temples and pray and meditate. And I had a great lifestyle because the pay was amazing. And so, I mean, I could go out, I could eat out all the time. And one bowl of wet noodles, which I guess is like the Chinese version of ramen. They just called them wet noodles in English. But like I could get a bowl of that with meat and vegetables and noodles for, I think it cost me like 16 kwai, the little restaurant I'd go to that was by my apartment, which is about a little more than $2.
Wow.
US. Yeah. My rent for my apartment was about $450 for a similar apartment in Texas, which is one of the cheapest states in the US for as far as cost of living goes. For a similar apartment would be like $1,000. So, I mean, I took trips. I went to visit like beautiful mountains, beautiful landscape. And then when I had to come here and transition to the US, it was a culture shock. Because you know, over there, when you were an English teacher, it was like an admirable thing. Like, wow, you're shaping the minds of these young kids in the future. And that's so great of you. And it was like an honor to get to be a teacher. And when I came back here, everyone was like, oh, like, well, what did you try to do before you became a teacher? They would just assume that I had tried some other career, hadn't been able to hack it, and then had like, you know, shamefully decided to go into teaching because that's all I could do, you know, and multiple people. I mean, people I didn't even, they'd be like, well, what did you try to do before you became a teacher? I'm like, nothing. Like that was what I did it because I wanted to do it, believe it or not. And yeah, and you know, like people would make that joke of like, oh, those who can do and those who can't teach, you know, which I can tell you as not just as an English teacher, I used to teach dance too in college and high school. To be a teacher, you have to know the subject even better than to just do it. If you're going to actually be good at it. Right. You know, to teach dance, you have to know the dance even better than you have to perform it, because you have to be able to break it down. You have to be able to take something that's very complicated and explain it in a very simple terms. And to me, that is the ultimate form of mastery. Is if you say you know a lot about something, but you cannot figure out how to break it down for me in very simple terms, then you do not know enough about the subject, in my mind, to be a master.
Totally agree with you, but there's a couple of quotes that pop into my head. One of them is, if you want to learn something, teach it to somebody else. Like the best way to learn something is to actually teach it to somebody else, like you just talked about. And then, shoot, what was the other quote? There was another saying. There was another thing that popped in there. Oh, Albert Einstein. He said, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old and make it make sense, you don't understand it well enough.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And I
that's
completely
teaching though,
agree.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. And but yeah, and so when there's like that sort of societal attitude towards it, but then like you get into the classroom, and and granted, I switched from doing elementary and middle school to high school, and so there's some argument to be made that it was the age group, but there's not a huge difference between 7th and 8th grade and freshmen and juniors in high school, which is what I taught when I came here to the US. But yeah, I mean, among the kids, very disrespectful. Thought it was a waste of time. Why am I here? Your job is worthless. This is worthless. This is a waste of time. For teachers, I mean, like I don't remember if I mentioned this to you, but like at my first school I taught at, I went to one of the people who's supposed to help you with lesson planning and stuff, and I said, I really am struggling with how to implement this and make this better, and I could use help. And she was basically, in a nice way, said, I don't have time to help you. My issue that I'm dealing with right now is trying to get teachers that are doing more than just showing videos in class. And if anything, like, you're a teacher, my problem with you is that you try to do too much. So, like, basically, you're fine, figure it out on your own. I have bigger problems to deal with.
Mm.
I mean, crazy disorganized, the administration disorganized, like tons of standardized testing where it's like they're telling you last minute, oh, you need to be here, you need to go to this testing room, or you have to sort these papers, or you have to do, like, just super chaotic. I had a really bad experience with a co-teacher that introduced herself as lazy and not liking to do anything. Um, like she would yell at me, she would yell at the kids, and I would like go to the administration and ask for help, and they'd be like, well, how could you manage her better? And I was like, I'm still a new teacher, right? So I'm like 25. This is my first year teaching in the classroom. She's been a teacher for 13 years and she's in her 60s, and like is acting like a child, having temper tantrums and screaming and stuff, not just at me but at my students. And I come to you with this issue, and your response is like, oh, well, how can you, the 25-year-old, manage the 60-year-old woman who has 13 more years of experience than you and is making more money than you, by the way? Because in China, it's merit-based pay.
Mm.
So at the end of my first year teaching, I didn't get to go back because of complications from COVID, but at the end of my first year teaching there, my school offered me a 30% raise in salary because I was one of their best teachers.
Mm.
Comparatively, their lesser teacher, he was offered a 6% raise in salary. Right? He wasn't very happy about that. He was pissed that they offered me more than they offered him because he'd been there longer. But I was like, you show the kids videos, I actually come up with games, I set up scavenger hunt, like I do all this stuff, right? I earned that 30% raise. In the States, because of teacher unions, you have lockstep pay. So
I was
it
just
doesn't
going to
matter.
ask you if there was a union in China.
I have no clue, but
Okay. I would bet there's not.
I would bet there's not either. Yeah, but and I was teaching at a semi-private school. Nothing there is completely private, but so maybe that had something to do with it, why they had a little more leeway of what they could pay us. But they did merit-based pay at the school that I was at. So I can't
Right.
speak to all of China. I can speak to my city at least, but merit-based pay, and so here it's lockstep pay. And they've tried to correct that. Now they have like this test where you can earn bonuses if your kids do well on a standardized test, but that's like a whole nother box of worms of why that's not actually an accurate reflection of how the teacher's doing, right? And so like comparatively, how they decided to do my my raise in China was the principal of the school at least once a week would go and observe all of the teachers. It might only be for 10 or 15 minutes, but he would walk around the school and he would go into every single classroom, or he would stand and just watch from the window, every single teacher. So by the time, and then I'd have my assistant principal who would come and observe me 3 or 4 times. So by the time it came around to decide what what raise I deserved to get, I had been observed at least 30 times by administration. In the States, especially in Texas, the method for evaluating a teacher, you get, if you're lucky, 1 observation in 1 class period. And so you get judged for 1 45-minute class, and that determines your entire evaluation for the whole year. And so by the time I got my raise offer and my evaluation, like final year report in China, I'd been observed over 30 times, every single class that I taught, multiple times, my advanced class, my on-level classes, my 4th and 5th graders, and my 7th and 8th graders. I'd had, so that's something that I think is a big issue here. But right, so to go back to that, like you have this woman who's not doing her job, who is not even behaving well. She didn't even know some of the names of, so I had 162 students that I knew the first and last names of every single kid. I could tell you what period they were in, and I could tell you at least one thing about them, right? Whether it was academic or personal. Every single kid, 162 students. She had 32 students she was supposed to be monitoring in my class, that were SPED or 504, which means special education, or 504 is usually some sort of learning disability like ADHD or dyslexia or something like that. And we got to like February, and she was like talking to this kid, like getting on his case about stuff and calling him the wrong name. And he wasn't even one of her students, but she thought he was. And I was like, how can you get to February? And the best part is the kid that was her student was Black. And the kid she was yelling at thinking it was him was Hispanic. So I'm like, even if you just look at his profile, like if you just click on his name, it shows you the picture on his ID. Like you haven't even looked at his picture, like, and it's February. Like, and I go to the administration, and they're like, oh, well, like, again, how can you manage her better? And how can you, and like her supervisor asked me to document all of this, right? And I'm like, but that's more work for me. Like, it shouldn't be my job to have to document when she's not doing her job. Like, are you going to pay me to be an administrator?
Yeah, like you're not her supervisor, right?
Yeah, I'm not her supervisor. Like this isn't my problem, but like just chaotic, right? And I mean, eventually what ended up happening is like we had an incident where she like screamed her head off at me and then went and tried to get me fired. And I was just like, I'm just done. I'm just done. And I had this like, cause I mean, I'd asked for help starting in, I want to say like end of September, early October in the school year. And that's when they told me to start documenting stuff. So, I mean, I had 6 months of documentation of every time she was late, every time she left early, every time she yelled at me, every time she yelled at a kid. I had documented with the days that she took phone calls, would just like take a phone call in the middle of class to talk to her son and like walk out and like we had no phones, and she'd have her phone like beeping and going off in class, like just all kinds of stuff. Like, like she was telling people that I was a dumb bitch. Like she was telling coworkers that I was a stupid dumb bitch because she didn't like me.
Did you say,
and
hey,
like,
I'm not dumb?
I might be. You can say I'm a bitch, but I'm definitely not. And honestly, like, and I've thought about this so much because there's like, there's always that petty part of you that is just like, well, you're the dumb bitch, And then there's like that other part of you that tries to be like, okay, Catherine, clearly this woman is going through something, and for whatever reason, she's decided that you are the person she wants to take it out on. And and for whatever reason, she whether she feels threatened by you or just doesn't like your teaching, who knows why she doesn't like me, but for whatever reason, she does not like me. And she wants to blame me for everything instead of taking responsibility of like, maybe if I actually did my job, because that was another issue. She did get in trouble a couple times for not doing her job. Like she should, because she wasn't,
Yeah, right.
But she blamed me for that. And like, yes, sometimes it had been because I'd gone and complained, but sometimes it was because other teachers came in. And they like one teacher came in, and she was an ESL teacher, and some of her ESL kids were sped, and she saw that they were not getting their sped accommodations from her because she wasn't doing her job. So she went and reported her. And another time an AP came in when she wasn't doing her job and saw that she wasn't doing her job and went and reported her, to her supervisor. And so
Imagine
I'm like,
that. Advocating for kids.
How dare you? Was my right? All of it was my fault. And so I'm just like, how, even if I was the one, right, who went and said this, if you had done your job, it wouldn't have been an issue.
Yeah.
Like, just like you're pissed that you're getting in trouble for not doing your job because you're not doing your job.
Just do your job, right? It's isn't hard to figure out.
Yeah, like, so, but unfortunately, like, I saw that a lot, and part of the reason I think you see so much of that in public education is because they don't pay teachers enough. They don't pay you enough for the shit you have to deal with. I mean, you got to deal with kids cussing at you. You got to deal with fights in your classroom. You got to deal with online bullying. I mean, I had to deal with them like girls getting like their exes sending their nudes out to their friends and revenge porn, and then you have it's considered child porn and pornography. So there's all these issues, and then you have to deal with kids bullying each other, and you have to deal with kids that don't have parents, or they cuss you out and then you call their parents and their parents cuss you out, and you're like, well, now I understand why they act the way they do. And like, just and you're having to be the kid's therapist and the kid's parent and the kid's teacher, and you're having to deal with standardized tests. So one, you're trying to help this kid, and then two, you're also still trying to teach them something. And then three, you're also having to make sure you're also teaching to the test. So it's just like, and then you don't have support, and, and you don't have people helping you out. You don't have a team. You only have one off period, which you basically have 50 minutes to go to the bathroom, respond to all of your emails, make any documentation that you have to do, write any reports you have to write, lesson plan, not only write a lesson plan where you show the administration that like, this is how I'm following the curriculum and all the Texas guidelines and TEKS and things like that. But then you also have to create the PowerPoint and the lesson that you're actually giving to your students. So it's just like, and I mean, the skills it takes to be a good teacher, someone who has that skill set in the private sector could easily make 2 or 3 times the amount of money in the private sector.
And they do.
And they do.
And they go do it, right? Yeah.
And then they go do it, right? And so it's just like, and so you get 2 people. And from what I've seen, you get 2 people. You get one, the people who they love kids, they're passionate about helping them, and they don't, even if they could go do something that pays them more, they don't care because their heart is so devoted. This is their calling, and that is they why they do what they do,
Mm,
right? And then you get the other teacher that's like, they get a steady paycheck. It's pretty much impossible unless you inappropriately do something to a child, or really get on the wrong side of an administrator, where you just like completely lose it and end up cussing them out or something. And even then, sometimes not, because there's such a shortage of teachers. Like it, pretty much short of inappropriately doing something to a student, you're not going to get fired.
right.
I mean, that teacher didn't get fired. We had documentation that she was out of state compliance, that she was breaking the law, she wasn't doing her job. Our students were owed compensatory services, like more than enough. Like, I was not apparently the first person who had complained about her not doing her job. It was well known, like, that she was like this, but she was a body that they could get that wasn't going to quit because she was there for the paycheck, and she's going to get a raise every single year no matter what because of the unions. So it's just like, so you get those people, you know, and and then I think you get the in between, which is maybe they started out as the first teacher, but they get so demoralized and they get so, you know, just run down, that they just kind of are like, I'm just writing this out until I can retire. And they try here and there to make an effort, but they're just so, I mean, it's a soul crushing system, I think. I really
Yeah. Yeah, I think at least from my perspective, and so I'm further down the road than you for sure. And when I was in school, Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan were the presidents when I was in school. So um I've noticed a couple of things, and then my wife and I raised three boys and went through both public and private schools at different times in their life. We did both. We did both public and private, depending on the situation, depending on the kid, depending on the school system, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so these are my opinions. Obviously, I think they're right, or they wouldn't be my opinions. But one is the breakdown of the nuclear family. I think in almost every instance, a kid needs a good mother and a good father um, as role models and leaders to help them. And I think we have dismissed that as a society and dismissed the importance of it. That's not to say that a single parent can't do a good job. That's not to say that a same sex couple can't do a good job. Not at all what I am saying. However, there is a lot of data that shows that households with present fathers have much better outcomes for their children than households that don't. Outcomes that include finishing high school, outcomes that include staying out of jail, households that include not getting pregnant before you're married, households that include not trying drugs. Um, and it's overwhelming. I'm talking like 75, 80, 100% higher rates of those incidents in households that have a present father. And I'm using the word present on purpose because simply because there's some fucking guy there that says he's dad is not what I'm talking about. And there's plenty of those situations out there. And it's one of the challenges I institute to men all the time is that, hey, I don't really care what society says. We need men to be men again. And I mean that in the right way, not the tradition. I'm not talking about the 1950s alcoholic father who beats everybody and is emotionally repressed and all the other terrible, but largely true in many instances, situations where there's men. I'm a very realistic person. I know there's a lot of shitty men out there, and I don't like them either. And I call them out anytime I see them as well. But we need men to step up and be men and to provide support and to provide guidance and to provide safety and stability for people because men are typically better at that. And it's because men are wired differently. We have different hormones in our body. They're the same hormones that cause us to take stupid risks and be morons in some instances, but they're also, and look, we can do that too. Like I'm very realistic. I understand what our upsides and downsides are. But there's something to be said for, I can tell you my kids would have never talked to a teacher the way you were talked to. That never would have happened because they would have had to come home and dealt with me and they would have been scared to death to do it. And they should have been scared to death. And I wouldn't have hurt them or beat them but they might have thought I would. And that threat is enough to keep them in line sometimes. And I raised 3 boys, and I can tell you right now that there's no dumber life form on the face of the earth than a teenage boy. They're the dumbest fucking people on the face of the earth. I was one, and I raised 3 of them, and the absolute lack of thought process or processing, the monosyllabic grunts that they answer to questions like, ugh. No, I asked you a question. That's not a word. Speak in sentences and respond to my question, you moron. Like you need someone to keep them in line. And then the second part of it is I think there's much too much bureaucracy in the educational system, and teachers that are good, that could be good teachers, are not allowed to be good teachers. And we can't get rid of teachers who are bad teachers. And I think there's a lot more good teachers or people that want to be good teachers than there are bad teachers. But I think those bad teachers are a real anchor around the folks that are trying to do a good job or there for the right reasons. For my 2 cents, that's my 2 cents from going through the educational system and having 3 kids that went through the educational system, the changes that I have personally seen over the years. And look, I can't remember where. I've got to find it because I want to do an episode on it. But I saw a woman, a social scientist, that was talking about the number one predictor of a woman being a good mother was having a supportive husband. Like by far, it was the most common thread between women who are good mothers. And she said, "You're not going to like it when I tell you, but this is the truth." And she said, just having that stability and that backing and that someone that is propping you up and giving you confidence to do that really hard job like my wife did. Like my kids are good kids. I think I'm a good parent. I don't hold a fucking candle to my wife as a parent. Like it's not close. She's Michael Jordan and I'm whatever, pick this biggest scrub in the NBA as it relates to parents. And I think I was pretty good as a parent. Like I think I was pretty good as a dad. I think I did a good job, but there is no substitute for having a good mother. And that's what men's jobs are, is to elevate women and provide them safety and support and stability so that they can do what they do. And like we just talked about, the women have different hormones in their body. They have more estrogen, they have more oxytocin, and they're more naturally wired to nurture and develop relationships and have higher emotional intelligence and read people than men are. And I think we as a society have minimized those differences when we should be celebrating and maximizing those differences to our benefit. Like if you do it right, you can really complement each other and have a really great system in place. At least that's what my wife and I were able to do, you know?
Yeah, I think there's a balance, right? And it's hard to tell, right? Because those things are true. But you have the nature nurture thing, right? It's like, do we see those things being true because that's how we're conditioned from a very young age to be? Because it's much more acceptable for women to have emotions or express feelings, and we're socialized to talk more and things like that, and have those responsibilities of holding space for emotions. Right. Whereas men, I think a lot of times they're not taught how to do that. And they're told just to suck it up and not to cry and to be tough and to push it down. Right. And so, if your brain is developing and it's going to develop a certain way, it's going to develop differently based on how you are socialized. But I do think there is some biological component to it, because women's brains do develop faster than men. And why teenage boys are so stupid is because their prefrontal cortex still isn't developed. and they
That's
actually
true.
they're the last part of their brain. I mean, girls, I think that they have the left and right side of their prefrontal cortex develop at the same time, and they finish developing earlier. Whereas boys, it's like the very last part of their brain to develop. It's like the left prefrontal cortex, which is literally all the higher order functioning, like the part of your brain that lets you answer questions eloquently and not just grunt, right?
Totally.
But I think there's a very I really love Eastern philosophy because the I'm very interested in this balance between masculine and feminine.
Yes.
And what I've seen is, even if you're a same-sex couple, and it doesn't matter if you're both women or both men, but one will tend to be more feminine and one will tend to be more masculine, and having that balance, not just in a relationship but also within yourself, which Jungian psychology talks about, that of like he calls it the anima and the animus, right? There's inside of men and women, there is this the feminine and masculine energy, and it tends to be that men have the more masculine energy, and it tends that women have stronger feminine energy, but it's still important to develop both of those, right? And so men need to be able to have that softer side, that more feminine energy, and then be vulnerable, because that's how they, like you said, that's how they protect. That's to me, the divine masculine, your job is to protect the divine feminine, right? And so what I see all these things, I got really interested into it when I'd watch my students, because I mostly had male students, because usually girls are in the more advanced classes and I taught the on-level classes. And so majority of my students were male students. And I got so interested in that masculinity, because I saw some really interesting things of, like, hearing the boys be like, oh, well, this is what a real man does and stuff like that. But I had one student who was very intelligent beyond his years. I'm not going to say wise beyond his years, because he definitely acted like an idiot a lot of times, but he was very intelligent.
Yep.
And there were two things that really stood out to me about him. Was two interactions we had. One, he got, this wasn't even anything to do with me. We were working on projects, and he was talking with this girl, and he got in an argument with her because she's like, oh, be a real man, and he got mad and he flipped, and that was something he struggled with, was anger issues. And he was like, I'm so sick of people telling young boys to be men. They tell us to be like, we got to be men. And he's like, no one ever says what that means. No one ever shows us what it means to be a man. Like, how can you expect someone to do something if you're not going to explain what it is, or show them how to do it, or teach them what it's about? And I was just like, and I mean, and he was just like, I mean, he was just, going, he was just going off because he got triggered. But I was like, he's not presenting it in a good way. The proper way was not to respond by standing up and yelling and, slamming your hand on the desk. But yeah, I had to send him out of the classroom. But what he said, I was like, he makes a really good point. And I mean, I knew his background was, he grew up in it was just his mom, and it was him and 3 sisters. And he was very protective. And I can tell you that his anger, because I was on the outside looking in, his anger issues came from, he grew up in a stressful household. He was very dysregulated. And anger is the emotion that gets us ready to fight. And
Yep.
he had this desire to protect his younger sisters. And so he constantly felt like he needed to fight everything. But that dysregulation had led to, he would get triggered at little things, and he would overreact because there wasn't someone to teach him how to productively channel his anger. And I mean, I could have done it because I know how, but one, I didn't have time because I had 150 other kids that I had to deal with, and I had a curriculum I had to teach, and I have, right. And also, I think you're right. It wouldn't have been as meaningful coming from a woman. I think it would have been more meaningful coming from a man. And I think sometimes coaches and things like that can sort of fill that role. But also, to kind of circle back, I think from my understanding of the studies that I've read, it doesn't have to, like, for non-traditional households, it doesn't have to always be their father or step parent. It can be an uncle, it can be a grandparent, it can be a close friend of the family. But having male and female, strong male and female role models is good for children, for men, for boys and girls. For girls, it's important for them to have positive male role models in their that are adults that they can trust, that they can interact with, that are part of their life. I think a lot of times the father is the easiest one, right? Like, if you could just get them to have a good father, that would be the easiest. But I think it's important, like, because I think when people are listening, and if maybe they're part of a non-traditional family or a single parent, I can't imagine if I was to end up being a single mom, like, well, that's totally out of my control of whether my kids are going to have a dad or not. Right. And so the idea that they're going to somehow be damaged in their development, because of that, when it's like, well, no, like, you can have a grandparent or an uncle or a friend of yours, but it's just important that they have, for boys and girls, it's important that they have multiple male and female figures that can be in their life. And I think it goes back to that sort of loss of community that we're facing. And so not only have we lost the parents, the present parents, we've also lost a present greater community. And some of that, I mean, you can say it's the iPad kids, because the parents, instead of having to deal with them, they just give them an iPad.
Yeah.
Some of it is more single parent homes. Some of it, I think, is, I don't know how we got here, but there aren't very many great examples. Like, there aren't that many great role models when you look out. I mean, so I don't know what the solution is, but it does make me. I think a lot about that is the balance between the masculine and the feminine, and challenging women to really work on developing those masculine parts of them, because masculine energy includes speaking up for yourself, setting boundaries, pushing back when someone is doing something that you don't think is right. I mean, those are all masculine characteristics, and I think a lot of women would benefit from developing that. But a lot of men would benefit from developing their feminine energy too, of being open, being vulnerable, being being able to process and hold space for their feelings and discomfort, and being able to have that soft touch. And I think the beauty of relationships is often you can create space for that within your relationship, right? The woman can create a space that is safe for the man to be soft and be more in his feminine energy, and the man can create an environment for the woman that it's more safe for her to be in her masculine energy. But I don't think it's exclusive, I guess, to a hetero relationship.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like anything else, I think very few things are black and white. And as I've gone through the world and I've gotten older and in theory learned more. And I say in theory because, my standard line is, it's too bad you didn't know me when I was 20, because I knew everything when I was 20. You didn't have to ask me. I would just tell you. That's how smart I was. I would just tell you I knew everything when I was 20. And it turns out I've gotten a lot dumber over the years because I don't know nothing. And I get to learn so much. One of the things I love about doing the podcast is I learn so much from talking to people who see the world differently. Like, I don't mean good or bad. I just mean differently. Like, there's tons of value in that. And for our audience, I think we do this all the time on the podcast. And I think sometimes it gets lost. We have people on, and look, I think I agree with everything Katherine just said, for what it's worth. Like, I think she said it very well and very intelligently, and I really appreciate her doing that. With that said, there's been people on, like, I absolutely love it when people come on and talk about their relationship with God and their relationship with their religion. And I find it genuinely interesting and very useful when they do that. Now, I don't hold those same views, but I don't judge those views when they're shared. I simply listen to them and try to learn from them myself. And that's what I always encourage people to do is get as much information as you can, gather as much knowledge as you can. And like I'm 53, if someone is 70 and they're telling me about their life experiences, I'm eating that up because they've got 20 years on me in life. They've got 20 more years of experience. I can learn from that. Conversely, I had a younger guy on and he and I really hit it off. And I love learning from him from his perspective because he grew up in a different world than I did. He's only 24 right now. But we've developed a relationship outside of the podcast because he's very intelligent and he's very reasoned in his approach. I don't agree with everything he thinks. I don't agree with everything that he espouses, but I learn from it. And there's so much value in learning from it. And so there's so much nuance to everything. I just really discourage people from making judgments about things. And if you really listen to what Katherine just said, she talked for a long time about subjects that could be considered touchy or controversial or whatever you want to call them. Not once did she make a value statement or a judgment about things. She was simply expressing ideas from things that she has learned and experiences that she has had and tried to share those with us so that we can learn from them. And I think there's so much value in that. I just really appreciate your approach on that. So my long-winded way of saying everything's got shades of gray, and you have to really pay attention to those shades of gray because it is rare that you can make global statements that are correct. That's why I rarely make global, like the words always and never, they should be used very sparingly because they're rarely correct. Like we're all going to die. Okay. There's a good global statement, but like short of that, it's tough to find other global statements that hold true when you put them under scrutiny, you know? So
yeah, without some sort of there's always an exception to every rule, right?
That's right.
But
That's right.
I like to use the term shades because when in art, when you're adding shading and you're adding different layers of shading, that's what gives a piece of artwork depth, and that's what gives it, you know, its beautifulness, right? And its quality increases the more shades that you add to it and the more complex it gets. And I also think about, for me, I do not understand why some people, it's so important to them that they need to be right. And if you disagree with them, they have to convince you that you're right. Because to me, if I met someone who agreed with every single thing I said, that would be like the most boring relationship. You know, like if everything you said to me, I was just like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Yeah, I totally 100%. Like, I would be so bored. Can you imagine if everybody you met ever just agreed with every idea? Like, I would be so fucking bored out of my mind. Like, you know, so, but I think there's some people who think, you know, if everyone just agreed with me, then there would be no problems in the world. I mean, I guess even I, to some extent, I mean, when you look at all the stuff that's happening right now, I'm like, if more people just thought like me, I do believe that we would have a better world. But, but I don't necessarily know that it's the same as wanting them to think all the same things I do.
Yeah. So for what it's worth, that's it. But Katherine, thank you so much. You did such a great job. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. I can't believe we're coming up on 3 hours here. We talked for quite a while, huh?
Yeah, we did. I have to go. But yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And again, I love the space that you're creating and the conversations that you're making room for. So thanks for this opportunity. I'm glad.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We'll keep you on our follow-up list. We'll touch base with you somewhere down the road and see what's going on, and maybe we can have another conversation. I enjoyed this one so much. I think we should do it again somewhere down the road.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. And I was like, you know, when you said it, I was like, I could think of like 5 more things to talk about, but like it's coming up on 3 hours, and I, you know, I need to go eat dinner. So. Yeah,
totally got it. Totally got it. Yep, we'll do it again. But thank you so much, Katherine. Have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, guys, there you go. So look, Katherine's the bomb, huh? She did a great job. Loved that conversation with her. She was so intelligent and well-reasoned in her approach, and clearly has done a lot of her own education and continued self improvement. And you heard her talk about her progression in life and developing confidence and learning from the experiences that she went through. Loved hearing about her coaching business and how well it's going. Loved hearing about her experiences with teaching in China versus teaching in the US. Loved her referencing that she's in such a great relationship now with her husband. And look, she's going places. We're really happy we got to have her on the podcast. And like we said at the end there, we'll keep in touch with her and see if we can bring her back on somewhere down the road. James puts it up over here every day. Head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcast episodes are there. Links to all social media accounts are there. We publish a newsletter every weekday, so you can subscribe to there. Make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you consume it on. We started a membership a little while ago. Don't forget that you can join as a member. We've got 2 tiers at $4.99 and $9.99. The $4.99, you get access to our episodes early. You get access to content we don't publish on the regular channel. And then at $9.99, you get access to our live streams where we go and take all comers and talk about whatever we want to talk about. And, you get to be a part of that great community if you join that. So make sure you check that out if that's something that interests you. Until then, we're going to keep having awesome people like Katherine on. We're going to keep giving you tips and ideas and methods by which you can build a meaningful and purposeful life. You don't want to miss any of that awesome stuff because we find awesome people to share their ideas with you. Make sure you catch our next episode. We'll see you there.